All right, Kyle, thanks for coming on to the hub.
Thanks for having me, Matt.
This is well timed given, the US pullout in Afghanistan, the pivot to Asia, a lot of things happening in the world, and the US military is involved. So I thought it would be relevant or pertinent to talk to someone who's served in Afghanistan. And I think you did a little bit in Iraq as well. So let's start there. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience in the military? I guess we should start at the very beginning. When did you join the military? What branch of service or what branch of armed services did you join? And why did you join?
Well, I joined the Army back in '85. I joined actually as a Korean linguist, military intelligence.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So you did the
So
same
I
thing
spent
as
my
as Trevor, because Trevor is
Trevor followed me. He went through the same thing, became a Korean linguist, and was enlisted for 4 years.
okay. You didn't have any deployment? I'm trying to think if there was any when you first joined. Did you?
We, as Korean linguists, military intelligence usually get to do some things. As Korean linguists, the fallout is so great that we don't get allowed to do anything extra. You put in for anything, it gets denied. But we were on alert while I was still in language school to go to Korea immediately because the tensions there.
This would have been late 80s then.
This would have been 86, 85, 86.
Got it.
Tensions happening in Korea. So we were posed to go there at any moment. That didn't happen. We managed to get through school before we all were deployed there. And we were deployed there, and there were tensions and things happened. My camp was blown up completely.
Wow.
Things happen over there, and it's said that it's an accident or it's done on a civilian basis, but there's people die in Korea all the time, and nobody ever hears about it. We had guys die on my campsite.
Wow.
In our camp that day. Nobody heard about it.
It kind of Korea. Yeah, it kind of reminds me of Afghanistan. The last 20 years, no one really talked about Afghanistan.
It was the forgotten war, and Korea is still just a truce. The war is never over.
Yeah.
So there's still problems over there. You got a madman over there still. So
I was going to say, you were dealing with the father. Now it's passed on to the son in Korea.
I was dealing with the grandfather.
Oh, really?
And the father. And I wasn't around for the latest guy.
The latest iteration.
But that's how my military career started. And I joined because I wanted to serve, but also because both my grandfathers had been in the military. I have one of my grandfather's books on how to fight in World War I, how to dig trenches, how to do things like that.
Oh, wow.
And then my father was in the military before I was born. He joined again while I was in junior high school. And then he joined the Air Force while I was in junior high school. We went to Florida, and then he came back to Washington State, and he joined the Washington National Guard. So I was around the military while I was growing up.
So military family, military tradition. And my brother, Trevor, who I referenced earlier, also served. And I think family had a big part to play in it, seeing your example as well. After the 4 years, did you stay enlisted? Did you re-sign up, or what happened after your initial 4 years?
Initial 4 years, I made it to sergeant, which in the Korean language is a big deal. You can come in as a Spanish speaker as a sergeant with no problem. But Koreans, since everybody has to be taught the language, everybody starts out as a private, and it's hard to get promoted. I made staff sergeant and went to OCS in Arizona.
Is that officer training?
Officer candidate school.
Okay, yep.
And after officer candidate school, I was in the Arizona Guard for a while. During Desert Storm, or Desert Shield, actually, I was called to active duty to run the computers for all the state of Arizona, for all the computers.
Wow.
And I did that for a while, and then finally went to flight school in, about 91.
And this is helicopters, right?
Correct. I was in the Army, flying helicopters as an officer full time.
Got it. And Black Hawk, right? Or or Apache, or are those the same helicopters?
No, they're two different helicopters. In flight school, when I went, you started in the Huey,
Okay,
and then you went on to your primary aircraft. At that time, mine was Black Hawk.
got it.
So I flew the Black Hawk for the last half of flight school, and when I first got to my unit back in Arizona. But when I got to Arizona, we were part of a unit, and right next to us was the Western Army Aviation Training Site. Well, they had Black Hawks. So technically, I was flying their Black Hawks.
Oh,
So
interesting.
my commander came to me and said, I can't have you flying a bird we technically don't own. So he gave me a transition to the 58, which was fun. It was I don't know, a week long or a 2-week transition. I can't remember now. And in the middle of that, he came to me and said, as soon as you finish this, I'm sending you to Apache school. So we had a lot of fun flying, got me another helicopter under the belt, and then I went to Apache school.
Got it. Well, a little bit for my my nerdy side, Apache's like the death machine, or is that the Black Hawk? Like what's the one that's really feared?
The Apache.
The Apache?
The Apache. The Black Hawk is a well, it's not a heavy, it's a medium. I guess you'd say it's a medium lift helicopter. It's for transport, for other things. The attack helicopter is the Apache.
Got it. I remember you telling me once that the Air Force with their fighter jets can hit certain targets, but when you're actually wanting to advance troops, the helicopters are indispensable because they can go with the troops, go with the tanks, and they can kind of help clear things out as troops move in. Am I remembering your points correctly, or am I off?
The first people the guys on the ground call and want is the Apaches. The second people the guys on the ground call and want are the A-10s.
Got it.
That's about the only people in the sky. And in later years, the combat C-130 that's outfitted with a cannon and big guns, 40 millimeter and 20 millimeter, they can hit too, but the first one they call is for the Apaches.
Interesting. Cool. So
we can get close to them, we can see them, and we can do it. We don't have to fly at fast speeds. We can get where we need to and get the job done.
Right. I remember that. Did you deploy in 91 in the first Iraq war at all?
No, I was set to, and when I was called to active duty to run the computers, they left me alone. They left me there. Since I was called to active duty for it and stuff, but I'd never left the state.
Got it. Okay. So fast forward, I guess, 10 years, 9/11 happens.
I was in Kuwait when 9/11 happened.
You were in Kuwait when
I was already over there.
Okay,
flying Apaches, and we flew the first missions for that. And we were obviously over there when it happened. It was a great change in our life. We went from a base that was pleasant to be at. You could go down to the economy to a base in total lockdown.
Wow. Was it almost like overnight, or how was it after?
Instantly. They walked everybody off the base who wasn't a U.S. citizen.
Wow.
Which is pretty amazing considering we rely on the locals for prepare the food, serve the food,
right,
take care of everything. The military no longer has those people in it. We have cooks, but we don't. When we go places like Afghanistan, we bring in civilian contractors to do the food.
Right.
So when you send all those people away, you don't eat. So for 4 days, we had MREs.
Oh, man. And from my understanding, MREs are not really, it's not Cheesecake Factory. They're not really, not really good.
They will keep you alive, but most people don't like them very much.
Yeah. So you were a part of the first wave into Afghanistan, flying Apaches. Can you talk a little bit about it? What was kind of the feeling? What was kind of your experience in Afghanistan, part of that first wave?
Well, I didn't actually go in on the first wave. We were in Kuwait. We set things up, flew some missions, and then I transferred back home to a stateside unit.
Got it. Okay.
I left again in 2003, actually got there in 2004, back to Afghanistan. By the time I got there, we were the third rotation in. And with every rotation, the people taking over wanted to be more like a civilian peacetime base. It was so ridiculous that on top of I was stationed where my headquarters is in an old Russian jet engine test facility, one of asbestos-filled rooms, nice places like that. But on top of this great concrete building, we had sandbag piles and places for people to fight out. Well, during the first rocket attack, all my guys went up there just like they were supposed to, no problem. Nobody got hurt. We come down off the building. A couple days later, the sergeant major of the fort there says he wants all those fighting positions taken down so it looks more civilian. So I told the commander that, not my commander, my commander's commander, that if Sergeant Major wants to take down the fighting position, my guys will not secure the roof. I won't put them in danger.
Interesting.
The 25th idea was a lot of how you look and not what you did.
Interesting. Taking a step back, what would you say? We were in Afghanistan for 20 years, spent almost $1 trillion there, we lost like, I think 2,000 troops or something. The Afghanis lost a lot more, put a lot more on the line, which makes sense. It's their country. What do you think the problem with the entanglement, or what do you think the main issue was with Afghanistan? Was it just changing, instead of looking at the perception of things, instead of getting into the root problem? But what do you think was the main issue with Afghanistan?
Well, part of what people don't understand about Afghanistan, it's not like Iraq. Iraq had an infrastructure. You could travel from everywhere. In Afghanistan, I flew over villages that the only way to get there is to walk. There's no roads. There's no communication. So it's very tribal, very centered by each little group community.
Right.
And while we were there, we actually adopted a couple different villages, took in aid to them. We went out and had meals with them, helped them build a school, and we even held Christmas at one of these places. Here's Arabic people who don't believe in Christmas celebrating Christmas with us.
Wow.
To give you an idea that the different mindset over there, you have the leader of that village. When we first came in, the first time with some aid, we had Apaches flying above, and we had the helicopters coming in, and the whole village scattered. And after we came down and got talked to them, the leaders came out. He said, the leader said, "You guys came in, you didn't let us know you're coming. You scared us to death. We all had to run," because they're used to the Russians who would come in and just kill people.
Oh, interesting.
And we said, well, the reason we do that is because I have such a small force on the ground that if anybody got wind of it, we'd be overrun in a heartbeat.
Yeah, right.
We only had 15 to 20 people on the ground at a time. And he says, "Oh no, you're here, you're under my protection." And he pointed to his number 2 man, and he says, "If you don't like him right now, I will kill him right now. You are protected." And he meant it.
Wow.
That's the mindset of that village. And this was a village that actually had a tractor, was a little more up to date, when the other villages we took on didn't even have that stuff. So with Afghanistan, it's a completely different culture over there. And for all of their lives, I was there for the very first vote in recorded history of the world in Afghanistan. They'd never even knew what a vote was, to vote for anything. They're so far behind the rest of the world. So if you go into a country that's so underdeveloped like that to do something, not only do you have to have a plan to get in and get the job done, but you have to have a plan to come out. If you want to bring them up to the rest of the world's standards, well, you're talking about 50 to 70 years of being there, because you actually have to be there and educate the kids and wait long enough for the adults to die,
right,
so the kids can keep it going. Well, no exit strategy was put in place. We went there with the mission, and as the mission, like I said, as the mission got on, instead of letting the mission happen, politics got more and more. It's just like Vietnam. You go out, you get started, it's happening. And then as soon as it becomes the politicians want to get involved, it becomes a nightmare. We used to do something in the Apaches called recon by fire, which is, you think might be something on this hillside or this hilltop, you shoot at it. and then you go see if you blew it up. Well, by the time I got there, they were doing that in some parts down by Kandahar, but up by us where we were having problems, they wouldn't let us do it. So we were heavily restricted on what we could do.
Is that because the media, right? It's wars, also politics as well, and politicians, media, they want to portray a sense of like, why was that the case?
Well, the media generally doesn't put out the truth. Like when some of the worthless politicians came to Afghanistan, like I can think of a few.
Right.
One tried to run for president. She failed miserably. She came over and, the media said, well, she was there and everybody was happy to see her. And, she congratulated troops and all that. That's not true. She came there, walked off the plane, said, nobody wants you here. You guys shouldn't be here. That's what really happened.
Interesting.
The media is entangled into politics. They don't report the truth anymore. So a lot of what happens is just a lie.
So I've been following the coverage. One point I wanted to make with regards to Afghanistan and being so far underdeveloped. I was reading an article by David Petraeus, or former, I don't know what, a general David Petraeus. Yes. He was saying that when we went in, pushed the Taliban back, basically took over, you couldn't, in his view, you couldn't just leave because there was a vacuum of leadership. They were so far underdeveloped. If you would have just pulled out, it would have been
they would
chaos.
Be right back in.
Yeah, they would have came right back in. It would have been chaos again. And so he's saying, yeah, no one likes nation building, but we can't just come in, wipe out, leadership, the country, and then just leave and not, it's kind of that old Colin Powell, you break it, you own it kind of thing. And I think it goes to your point saying that Afghanistan it's not like Iraq where there's people were educated, there was infrastructure there. It was so far not developed that you almost had to stay and kind of build a little bit.
That should have been brought up in the very beginning after we first got there, and the American people should have been conditioned to know that we're going to be there for a while.
Yeah.
Because the other thing that happens over there that people don't understand, there's still Bedouins over there who don't consider them part of anybody, and they just travel around the country. They travel in and out of other countries. And that's kind of what happens. When I got there, we knew bin Laden was in Pakistan. We knew he was there. But, Pakistan wants to be our friend, but they don't want to be too much our friend.
Right.
And so they weren't doing anything. And it took time to find exactly where he was, but we weren't allowed to go in and get him.
Interesting.
So it makes an interesting thing when you don't have, once politics and worrying about political things happen, then the actual what's happening on the ground gets really bad.
Interesting. It gets confusing. I can imagine it gets tough for the troops because you can't really, you go in, kill the bad guy, where once politics or things start changing, it's like, okay, find the bad guy, but maybe not kill him, or don't kill him in front of everyone else, make it.
Well, we didn't have that problem because we were cleared. If we saw a weapon and anybody was pointing at us or anything, we were cleared to shoot. That wasn't a question. That comes later on. The guys that came in after me have those problems.
Interesting.
The guys that came in before me didn't have any restrictions at all. They had those military restrictions. You hit military targets, you hit military things. But as each batch came in, the restrictions get more and more. Like I said, I came in aviation task force, which meant I took all different types of aircraft under my wing. My unit had only Apaches. By the time I got there, I had 4 different kinds of fixed wing aircraft. I had Apaches, Blackhawks, Chinooks, everything under our command. And so we had all the aviation assets in the entire area were under our command.
Interesting.
And we took a small part of them, we sent them down to Kandahar but we were in control of all aviation assets in the country, except for the Air Force, Marines. You know, those guys don't play ball with anybody.
Right. Everyone kind of says.
Well, I won't say that. The Marines are great. Marines are great. They're always there. The Navy's great. But the Air Force, when Afghanistan kicked off, the Air Force said that they actually couldn't come help and fight the war with us because they were too busy. The Air Force is some of the greatest politicians you've ever seen. They have gotten themselves put in a position to where they're almost useless. Now, during Desert Storm, when Colin Powell was put in charge, he was put in charge of everything.
Yep.
And everything worked because he made it work. But when you have separate commands, like the Air Force is out here, you can't get the Air Force to come help you.
Right.
They're not interested in being part of the game. The infantry guys, the Marines, anybody called us, we came and helped. It didn't matter.
Yep.
And if we were lucky enough to have some A-10s or something flying around, we'd call them. The A-10s would fly and help us in a heartbeat. The rest of the Air Force wasn't there. They didn't care. If we weren't their mission, they wouldn't divert for anything.
Interesting.
The A-10s, they would divert low on gas and out of bombs just to shoot a few bullets.
Seems like the military is ripe for some innovation or some reform. I kind of want to switch gears here a little bit. Well,
okay.
One, with the pullout, obviously poorly executed, left people behind, Afghanistans and Americans. What would you have liked to have seen instead?
Well, if you're going to do a pullout like that, first thing you have to do is make sure that the country can survive. Problem is all those fighters that came in are from other countries. And they were just on the borders of all these other countries, because it's not like America or Europe where there's distinct borders. In the desert, you're flying the desert and suddenly you're in a different country.
Right.
Nothing's there. Nothing's there for tens of just miles and miles and miles. You can go 100 miles and never see anything. So people just go across the borders and wait and come back. And that's part of the problem with fighting the Taliban is they would just run across the border into Pakistan, move 20 miles up and come back in. So what we should have done, we own bases in Kandahar, south of Afghanistan, in Kabul, the center of Afghanistan, and Bagram Air Base in the northern part of Afghanistan. Bagram Air Base constantly had huge jets flying in while I was there, civilian jets, DHL, other people bringing us stuff. We could have maintained those bases and got everybody out without any problem. We could have got everybody out before we pulled out the troops, which is what should have happened. You always get all your civilians, all your non-military personnel who are associated with you out of harm's way first, and then the troops come out. To do it the other way, it just shows the inept of our current command structure, our current president.
So why did it happen? So why did we just
incompetence, no plan, and trying to win points in the media. Look, we did this. We got everybody home on this date. To make a date was stupid. We didn't have to give anybody a date. We never had to do anything.
I just don't.
We could have just said we're going to be here until we get everybody out.
Yeah, I just don't understand why they gave up. From my readings, the northern base, Bagram Air Base, it seemed like it was a hard fought, it was almost like our pride and joy of of a base, and we just deserted it in the middle of the night. We didn't even tell Afghanistan, our allies. We just deserted it in the middle of the night. It just blows my mind.
It was a great base, well protected. Now, we got rocketed all the time and stuff while I was there, but it was a good place. Like I said, we could handle anything coming in and out.
Yeah, it just blows my mind.
And to leave that was just insanity, pure insanity.
Yeah,
that should have never been given up.
And not to even tell your allies, the Afghans who fought and have died. I think it was 60,000 or maybe even more, 600,000. A lot of Afghanis that died, threw their lot in with the U.S. and then we just abandoned it in the middle of the night. Don't even tell them, and it's well, of course they're not going to survive if the U.S. is fleeing their prize bases.
Exactly.
Of course they're not going to survive.
And the the lie that you can take a lightly armored infantry people, which is what the Afghan army was, and take away all their air support and their gun support, and they're going to be just fine, is foolish.
Yeah. So what do you?
The other fighters coming in have no rules. They have no limits on the stuff they're getting from people.
Yep.
It's tough.
What about all the military equipment we left behind?
That's just a pure embarrassment. If you're going to leave military equipment for a military, then you continue to support that military. You don't leave them your stuff and run away. If we were going to leave equipment, we should have left a base there so we could bring in parts, we could fix things for them, we could keep things going.
Yeah.
Because you give somebody a car out in that area and tell them to run around and kill people in it, it's going to last from a month. If you're really careful, it might last a year if nothing goes wrong. But then it's a piece of junk. So we left them a bunch of equipment to fight with that wasn't going to get supported. So you don't really want to take your good vehicle that carries these people into this little ditch to hide to save your life, because it's going to get blown up and left there. It's a crazy situation to think you give somebody all this equipment and no way to keep it going.
Yeah. I was reading like Afghanis who were on our side were trying to Zoom call contractors to figure out how to fix, helicopters or do stuff. And it just blows my mind that we just abandoned things the way we did. What would you say though to people who said, well, we couldn't stay there forever? Yeah, it was messy. But we had to get out, and it was always going to be messy when we get out.
See, that goes with what the goal was. Now, our goal changed from to make them a nation. I mean, we stayed there. We helped them set up things so they could have their first election.
Right.
So we went right into nation building. Nation building takes time.
Yeah.
But when people say, we had to get out of there, well, we still have people in Germany, we have people in Italy, we have people in England.
Japan,
I mean, I can tell all the countries
South
we
Korea.
still have people in.
Yeah.
Now, Korea makes sense because that war has never ended and people still die. But we have people in Japan, we have bases everywhere throughout the world that we still have people in.
I know.
And we went there for a reason, and then we stayed to build the nation. And then a third of the way through nation building, we tuck tail and run. So of course the nation fell. It's going to fall. You can't take a nation that had no sense of itself before. And while we were there, after 20 years, a lot of the villages still didn't consider themselves part of an Afghan nation. Right. They were just that tribe still, that little village. And you can't quit a quarter of the way through and think the nation's going to stand up.
So a couple of thoughts that I had. Why didn't the U.S. think about like dividing Afghanistan into those that wanted to be part of the Afghanistan nation? And it seemed like northern Afghanistan was, they've always fought the Taliban. I think they're still fighting. There's still some remnants holding out. So that was one question. And the second question is, why didn't any generals kind of really push back and say, this is a bad idea?
By the time you get to general, you're a politician. And if your general above you says, we need to do this, and you don't have a good rapport with them, and you say, that's a bad idea, well, you've just been replaced. And like most politicians, all politicians want to do is get reelected.
Right.
That's the first goal of any politician. Well, when you get up in the military ranks, you soon become not a commander anymore, and you become a politician in charge of a base or a politician in charge of something else. Once you quit commanding troops, you kind of lose sight of what you're really there for. I've known a lot of generals because my father, I knew more generals than privates when I first started out. And a lot of them were great guys. And a lot of them would tell you, well, we can't do this because the 3-star over me doesn't want to. Or we went with this weapon from this company because the 3-star knew somebody in that company and wanted it that way. Or the politicians said we had to have this. I mean, it was a political thing to go from the 1911 45 caliber pistol to the 9mm Beretta, because we wanted to be politically correct and use the same bullet that our European allies used. which is stupid. It's proven to be a worthless bullet, doesn't do anything. In fact, while I was in Afghanistan, the Army had passed it to go back to the 45 because in Afghanistan, the 9mm was worthless. You'd better off throwing rocks. And so they get everything to go to the 45, and what happens? The government gets involved, and we have yet another 9mm.
How does a civilian like me, having served in the military, feel? I'm hearing these stories, hearing this viewpoint, doesn't inspire confidence much in our generals.
There's some great people in great spots, and they do things they can do. The problem is when you're up there really high, you also have to deal with all the politicians.
Yeah.
Now, like I said, I've known a lot of generals, and a lot of them are really good.
Yeah.
I've known lots and lots of colonels, and I've met a lot of good people. By the same token, I know some really bad ones. Yeah. The one that was in charge of the 25th while I was over there, he turned it into one of his people from his own unit put up a great big sign, said the 25th ID. It's not what you do, it's what you wear.
I guess that goes to show, though, we still want civilians in charge of the military, right? We don't really worry about a military coup here in the U.S.
The military works for the people.
Yeah.
The problem is we have to go through the politicians to do it. Mm. Now, there's good politicians. Lately, I think there's been a few. A couple of them come from the military, and a couple of them have come from outside places. But once you get, I think it's one of President Trump's things that had him a downfall is he said he was going to go in and clean out the swamp. Washington, D.C. is a swamp of people who their only goal is to keep their job.
Yeah.
It is a horrible way to run a country. They are so not in touch with the world. It's scary.
So 2 questions for you. You can take either which one you want to do first. First is, why does it seem like the U.S. can't win in their military interventions? Afghanistan, seems like we were winning, but then we got bogged down. We were there for 20 years, and all of a sudden we pull out. Super messy. Just really bad. We leave people behind. Iraq, always up and down, had to do the surge. ISIS. Why is it that the military can't seem to win in military interventions?
Because of politicians. If the president says, military, get up and go do this, and he keeps all the politicians out of it, it's done. Every time that's happened, we've gone in and done everything. For instance, Panama. Military was set up, go in and do it. Bam. In, out, done. Grenada, same way. The reason you have problems in Iraq and Afghanistan, especially Afghanistan, is once Iraq started, Afghanistan was forgotten about.
Yeah.
We fought the forgotten war. Nobody talked about us at home. Nobody cared we were there. Yet we were still fighting.
Yeah.
We were still shooting people every day. And did they give us? I wasn't even allowed enough ammunition for my Apaches for them to train properly and to be able to shoot something without having to say why they shot. My wasn't a restriction on you can't use the ammo. Mine was, well, you used 300 rounds to destroy one vehicle. Why? You only needed 10. And some of the ammo they left for us destroyed a helicopter that was there before us. Yeah. And it was all taken off, supposed to have been taken off the line as bad ammo. It's ancient. And they put it right back in the system and gave it to us when we got there. I had to get rid of it again. So it's not the military can't win. It's you have to be able to put forth what's needed to win. And in America, I'm sorry to say, stickability is just not here. I'm surprised that the American people didn't throw a fit about Afghanistan a long time ago. But it was the forgotten war. So we didn't get the supplies you needed. You didn't get the stuff you needed. You didn't get the troops you needed. But you had to keep doing what you're supposed to do.
Seems like you guys were in a tough spot for sure.
What was the other part of that question?
Second question, I didn't get to it just because the first one was so long. Second question is, what advantages does the U.S. military have over other militaries? Is this advantage diminished at all with the pullout? we talked a lot about the shortcomings in the military. Surely what advantages do we have to other militaries, and how does the pullout affect?
We are the biggest, the strongest military. We have the better equipment. We have the better people. They're better trained. The perception of America has been hit once again because of the pullout in Afghanistan and how poorly it was done, that we backed out on our friends that helped us, because everybody in Afghanistan who helped us is now going to get killed.
Yeah.
They're going to go kill them all, because that's what they do. When you rule by fear, that's what you do. You kill everybody who might be an enemy or a political person.
Yeah, there's going to be some nasty images.
And the bloodbath has already started.
Yeah.
And of course, since they're in the country, nobody can see it. So our reputation as Americans has taken a huge hit again. Nobody's going to believe us. I mean, the first time we went into Iraq during Desert Storm, the people who lived in southern Iraq backed us. They wanted us to come in all the way. They supported us. But of course, then we pulled back out to the border, and those people who supported us
got wiped out.
We went back in again. They didn't support us because they knew we wouldn't stay. We wouldn't do it and didn't need it. And that is the problem. Now there's more parts of the world that say, oh, well, the Americans got beaten by a bunch of ragheads, people running around in, long johns and whatever. It's not true. But we pulled out, which allowed them to take over the country again.
I saw one video of, there was a saying that the Taliban wouldn't be able to handle the sophisticated equipment that we left behind. This video I saw, though, was Taliban flying some helicopter, and this is kind of grisly, but a guy was hanging from the helicopter, dead. And it was to, send a message to all the Afghanis who helped us. Hey.
Well, the problem is if you're talking about people who lived in Afghanistan, there are very few who are pilots who are technically proficient. But the fighters that come in with the Taliban come in from all the other countries. So you'll have people coming in from Iraq, from Pakistan, where they have training and they have knowledge.
Interesting.
And all of a sudden they're considered part of the Taliban, but they grew up in Syria, or they grew up in fighting Iraq on Iran's side. So you have all these people that come into the country who have skills. And, should we have left some of that equipment? Definitely not. Not if we weren't going to stay there and help them, because all it does is it was immediately going to go to them. Anybody who served over there as a soldier, not a politician, but a soldier, knew if you back out of an area, well, they come out of the woodwork from other places, over the border, or this town that's been nice to you and helping you. Well, 50 guys come out of there with rifles, and it's a new squad to come kill you.
Yeah.
The problem with that is you're fighting a people that have no army. They're all just an army. We'd go into some place, and it'd be somebody's home, and they had broken out the wall where they had mudded up their weapons when the Soviets were there, and they broke them out to fight again. They're in the wall. You'd never know they're there until they won.
I think that's part of the frustration with people. If I were to be a politician, I think that was the frustration politicians felt was, hey, there's really no easy solution here. I want to get the credit for pulling the troops out. I'm just going to do it because there's no easy solution here. I'm fighting people that, don't want to be part of the Afghanistan nation. Why am I sacrificing blood, toil, and, people to build in Afghanistan that, there's no real direct threat to America?
Well, they forget why we went over there in the first place.
Yeah, 9/11. Yeah.
Now, the problem, once again, is you're talking about politicians. Politicians' goal is to get reelected. And politicians are very short-sighted. I mean, when you talk to somebody in other countries, when they're planning something that might take 50 years to complete, or 50 years to change to what they're talking about. In America, we want it done in a month.
Yeah.
If it can't be done, if it takes a year, then it's 9 months too long and you didn't do it right.
Yeah.
And that's the attitude that you get. But when you're talking about walking through and talking to every single person in the country multiple times, That takes time. And then to teach them and let their kids go to school. I mean, to have girls go to school, it had never been heard of in that area.
Yeah.
So for us to build school and the girls to go to it is astounding. Of course, now a lot of those young ladies are getting killed because they went to school.
Yeah.
And, bad things are happening. And that's what the Taliban does.
Interesting. It seems like if we would have maybe highlighted more the successes we've had, and I like the phrase that you said earlier, condition the American people that, hey, this is going to be a long-term thing. Here's the exit strategy, though. Here's it. Incompetent.
A lot better.
Yeah.
I guarantee you there were no reporters, nobody at all, who came out to us when we adopted those villages. And we had big people helping us. We had a lot of big money on the states sending stuff over to us, a lot of volunteers doing things. And then on our side, the three of us that started it put out a lot of money to get the first containers there.
Yeah.
Because like any other country, the countries around Afghanistan where the port was, well, we had to send somebody down there. And then he had to bribe the guy to get the legal container that's coming to us to be allowed to come to us.
Yeah.
When you start bribing people $1,000 at a time, it gets expensive. And our guys did it without question. They didn't put it on anything. They didn't request it back. They didn't beat their horn. They did it. And there's no reporters around for that. I can guarantee it.
Well, thanks for sharing a little bit about Afghanistan, kind of the frustrations, the problems, and I guess it's helpful to understand the broader context of what all is going on there. Because as a civilian, you just read what you see in the news and you kind of, you get one side of the story. So this is helpful to hear the other side, or to hear other things that aren't being reported, I guess.
But I think I heard it in a movie once that you could fill 1,000 newspapers with what the news leaves out of the news. It's just, they go for the big thing that's going to get them a story, not the truth.
Yeah.
The truth. I mean, yellow journalism is still an accepted practice in America, all over the world, actually. You just lie about it. You don't know, you make it up.
Yeah. I kind of want to wrap up the podcast with a question from an audience member. And the question is how has your perception of the U.S. military, leaders, its missions, objectives changed since when you joined to now, once you've gotten out?
When I joined, because of my travels and stuff around the world, I knew the military was everywhere. And I knew some of the reasons why we were in different spots. But when I went in and learned Korean, and that became my focus, all of my study and intent was on that little part of the world.
Yeah.
And as I grew in the Army and took on bigger things, well, then the scope gets bigger and bigger. But the military, we have the greatest military in the world. There's no doubt about it. You tell our military to go do something, they will do it. It'll be done, over. But the country right now is such a fighting stage that nobody wants to back things. I mean, our current president can't put two words together without getting one of them wrong.
Right.
And so I don't know who's actually doing anything up there. His vice president is trying hard to distance from him. So who's in charge? I think it's guys behind the scenes, like it mostly is all the time. So our military is still very strong. It's still very capable. We have great leaders. It's like anything else. Any big corporation, you're going to have some losers.
Yeah,
that's just how it is. Every place has a loser, but there's few of them in the military. They're there. I've run into a couple of them. I've had to serve under a couple of them. I served under one while I was in Afghanistan. But for the most part, there's a lot of good people. And even though he was our commander, all the commanders under him, we all got together and decided who was going where and kept our guys alive in spite of him. So, but our military can do whatever it's asked, go wherever it needs to go, and do anything. The military, even though there's the Army Navy game, and everybody, different services have these rivalries. When it comes down to it, if a Marine called me, I was there to save those Marines. I didn't care who they were. They're Americans. The U.S. Army has grown, has developed. Our biggest drawback is probably the useless infantry weapons that we carry. We carry a 22 caliber rifle, and it's supposed to do all these great things. But from those of us who've been in war with it, it doesn't do great things. You can shoot a guy 3 times and he'll still pick up an RPG and shoot back at you.
Yeah.
The worthless gun I had, it was great. I gave it to my flight surgeon so he could go on a ride on a Chinook. Well, they happened to stop and pick up guys who shot an RPG at him. One helicopter flight, my rifle was so jammed, he could barely make it work. The little things like that, and we have those because of politics. A weapon system will come in because of politics, not because it's what we really needed or what we really wanted. And that's happening more now just because, well, everybody wants to give something to the military because it is the biggest user of those type of items.
Right.
If you want development to go forward throughout history, the military has had things developed during time of war.
Yep.
But our military is strong. It's very capable. We took a big black eye because of what our government did, but the military is a great thing, full of great kids who want to do the right thing, who want to serve their country, and of course they all want to make it home.
Yeah. So so from hearing your answer, it sounds like your perception of the military really hasn't. They're still good people, still really capable. Maybe more recently, it's been a lack of leadership and just incompetence.
Well, that's leadership and competence up the chain. That's not the guys on the ground. That's not soldiers, and that's not the generals that were over them. That's the politicians. That was the politicians who gave us this big black eye to America. They should be embarrassed and ashamed.
Well, I think that is happening. Looking at the polls, who knows if the polls are right, but Biden's really dropped down in his support, and I think Americans are starting to notice. I think there was an appetite to leave, just not like how we did.
Now, we left in a very bad way, gave America a very bad reputation, and got a lot of our friends are going to get hurt or killed because we didn't take care of them.
Yeah.
Interpreters I had while I was there. Of course, I left in 2005. I've been out in the military since 2009. I've lost touch with all of them. If they didn't make it out, they're in a world of hurt because they went everywhere with us. They came on base with us. We had meals with them.
Yeah.
We fought with them.
Side by side. Yeah.
And there's no reason we shouldn't have taken those guys home with us, them and their families.
It is a sad scenario. As I've said in other podcasts, the ground is shifting beneath our feet, and I don't know if the shifting of the ground's necessarily in a good way for the U.S., especially the way we handled it.
I think this shows a bigger problem of what's happening in the U.S. with our government, with two silly sides fighting against each other and forgetting all the people who aren't on the extremes.
Yeah.
America was founded center right, basically.
Yep.
And if we stay in that area, somewhere around the center, everybody gets along. It's when you get these people who want us to become a communist state, or want us to become something else, or want us to be so the other way that there's no laws. You can't have those and run a country. And right now, we've got them in politics.
Well said. Well, thanks, Uncle Kyle, for coming on, spending some time talking with me, educating me. Again, this is why this podcast was created, was for me to learn. I realize that there's different stories, there's different viewpoints not being reported. And so for me, this is always enjoyable because I learn as I interview and talk to people. And, I know, thank you for your service. I know those memories and sometimes can be tough to talk about, but I really appreciate you coming out of your shell and talking, sharing your experience and talking with me.
I got one more thing for you.
Sure.
I'm a firm believer that everybody who went to war came back with some form of PTSD. The younger kids usually handle it well because they went and did what they did. They're young in life. They rebound pretty well. The older you get, the harder it seems to be. When I came back, the VA person, as I was getting out of the military, she was in a hurry and she didn't know what she was doing. She asked me 2 questions. Did you see something that disturbed you? I said, yes. Give me one specific thing that disturbed you so much you have nightmares. And I said, there's not one specific thing. She said, so you don't have PTSD, you're out. I didn't have one specific thing. I have hundreds of them, that I saw and did, things that happened that it's not something you want to tell people about because they don't understand. Flying an Apache, I'm a lot like the guy on the ground. I see the face. I know what I'm doing. I'm not like a jet that's flying at 20,000 feet, dropping a bomb on an object. I'm hitting people. And we remember those things.
Well, we appreciate the service, and it seems like it's not only politicians in the military, but maybe politicians in taking care of our veterans too need some help as well. Area of right for reform, for sure. Well, thanks Uncle Kyle for again talking to us. Really appreciate it, and we'll see you again.
Thanks, Matt.
See ya. Bye.
Bye.